One of only 9 domestic violence refuges in the UK, exclusively for men, may be forced to close less than a year after opening because of a lack of funding. It's estimated that 1 in 6 men will be the victim of domestic abuse in their lifetime. The Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service says it needs to raise £100,000 to save it, and also 4 women's refuges. Our reporter James Melly is the first journalist to have filmed in the refuge. Here's his report.
She's quite controlling. She used to always take money out of my bank account when I got paid. She threw stuff at me. Got a dent on my head from what she was doing, and she basically kept me away from my family for the last 10 years.
We need to raise £100,000 by next March. It's that important for us to keep these refuges open.
If the refuge is closed, then it's an absolute travesty for domestic abuse victims. Worst case, you're going to look at deaths.
Follow me.
This ordinary-looking house in a town in Northamptonshire is in fact something very rare.
Another one of the residence rooms. Also there, both with locks on.
It's a refuge for male victims of domestic abuse, one of only 9 exclusively for men in the country.
We have 3 rooms, so 3 males here, and with the potential of having a child if needed.
It's estimated 1 in 6 men will be a victim of domestic abuse in their lifetime. The men here are considered at serious risk of harm, so its location is kept secret. Matthew Cunningham works at the refuge.
We have to make sure there's a safety plan put in place before the victim actually come here, analyse the risk, have a number of risk assessments to make sure that the victim is safe. Lots of victims don't recognise that they are victims, but men especially, because it's not seen and it's not heard of as much, and it's so underreported that males don't recognise that they're victims sometimes at all, and don't see what domestic abuse is or understand what it is, and have never known the right path to go down to get help.
I know it sounds silly, but if someone hurts you, man up and just get on with it. And I didn't realise that there's actually people out there to help males and females.
Dean is one of the men living at the refuge. We're hiding his identity for his safety. He says he lived with an abusive female partner until one day he collapsed at work.
They don't know if it was a fit or if it was through dehydration, because I wasn't basically eating and I wasn't allowed to eat at home.
Why weren't you allowed to eat at home?
Because all the food we were getting at home, my partner was taking.
Your partner was stopping you from eating?
Yeah. A lot of this was mental abuse, so she'd be shouting at me, taking money off me. If I was 5 minutes late at home, I'd come in the house and she'd be shouting at me, "Why are you late?" And sort of, well, I've only just finished work. And she'd be quite aggressive towards me.
You experienced physical violence as well, though, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, did actually get plates chucked at me. Got a dent on my head from what she was doing. Just didn't feel safe.
Had you heard of male victims of domestic abuse before?
No, I hadn't. No, I just thought it's part of being in a relationship. She's the first person I've went out with, and I thought that's what it's supposed to be in a relationship. But now I know she was doing it wrong.
The male refuge only opened 7 months ago and is run by the Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service, or NDAS. Zoe Tatham is their business manager.
I think it took probably 3 or 4 weeks for it to be full, just to get the word out there that we were available. And since then it's been full for the whole of the time that we've had it. We've helped 16 men in refuge since we opened, but we've turned, I think it's 50 away.
But despite there not being enough space in the refuge to meet demand, it and 4 other refuges for women, also run by NDAS, are facing possible closure in the spring.
We need to raise £100,000 by next March. Not a small amount of money, but you know, we can do it. We're going to be speaking to all the district and borough councils as well to see what funding they can, you know, give us to support it, and also our MPs, because it's, you know, it's an important issue that affects the county's most vulnerable people. So it would be a real shame for us to lose it. We've got specialist refuge.
NDAS had been hoping to win government funding that Northamptonshire County Council had applied for, but the authority failed in its bid. Separately, the council is now facing a multi-million-pound hole in its finances, forcing it to cut services. NDAS has been forced to look elsewhere for money. Last week, Northampton Borough Councillor Terry Eales tried to convince her authority to help out.
We've got a motion going to council tonight. If that passes, it's basically requesting that this council supports financially NDAS in getting the 100 grand that they need to keep the refuges open for a further 12 months.
Do you think you're likely to win tonight's vote?
Honestly, no. I'll do my best in the debate to try and convince them to vote our way. I don't think it's likely, but hopefully they'll listen to the debate and the arguments that we've got to fund this a little bit further.
What would the consequences be of the refuges closing?
If the refuges close, then it's an absolute travesty for domestic abuse victims. We've got one of only 9 in the country male refuges that NDAS provide. If that's not there, best case will be that the Borough Council has to pick up the slack for the emergency accommodation. Worst case, you're going to look at deaths. They're not going to get the help that they need.
Northampton Borough Council did vote to help keep the refuges open, but it's not yet clear how much money it will be able to contribute. Northamptonshire County Council told us it still takes domestic abuse very seriously and continues to fund services to deal with it. The government has increased funding to domestic violence services by £19 million this year in England. But NDAS is still trying to secure the money it needs to prevent its refuges closing. Dean is hoping the funding can be found. For him, going into refuge has given him hope for a new life, safe from domestic violence.
I'm hoping I'm going to get myself back into employment, and hopefully get myself into my own little place, and just live a simple life to myself. I just want to be on my own and live, and I know how I can live how I want to live, not be dictated.
Are you more hopeful now?
Yes, I am, yes. A lot hopeful.